So let's talk about effects. Effects, a place near and dear to my heart. What I find a lot of times that bothers me with great design and art direction is a lot of times the effects are kind of left out, and they don't quite match the art style, or to me it doesn't balance well with the art style. That's not all games, it's just sometimes that bothers me, so it's critically important. So I decided, the smoke fades because it's top down and you walk into the smoke. I wanted it to fade out based on the camera, but let's look at the fire. So one of the problems with fire is fire is mostly about what it's burning. It's not, a lot of people want to put like a fire and just attach it to objects, and it's like that's okay. Depending on the restrictions or the constraints you have on the game, maybe you need a fire that you can just attach to things, but for the most part you need the object that is on fire to have a material that is also on fire. So here's an example of that, where I have a pile of ash that has a material and the logs are on fire, and that helps really sell the whole it's on fire, it's burning. Another fire so the smoke it's still something I'm not, I mean, even last night I was like, these shapes are really jaggedy. I'm not sure that low poly is really too low poly. Is it work for this? I like that they sort of jiggle and they have a bit more natural movement based on their vertex animation, but it's just it's good for now. So I have here's a forge where you can see a little bit more fire, like where you can get that sense that like coals are different than the wood that's burning, that they have a bit of they're a little more diffuse, or not diffuse, desaturated. And yeah, I think that's let's just take a look at these fires. So this is what it looks like if you would just take that object out. Ugh, I hate that lighting. And this would work with any type. This doesn't, because it's a low poly, like that same technique would work on any type of fire. Let's take a look at the logs, for example. So here again is our base fake lighting that I build into the logs, because some of the logs are on fire and some of the logs are actually just logs. So the two colors are actually pulled from Photoshop to be the exact colors. That's not good. That should be, technically I'd put all the colors into parameter collection that I use to make sure that all the colors match precisely. But right now this was to be quick. And let's see, texture coordinate 1. Well, let's go to the log. Let's go to fire log. All right. So okay, so what I'm doing is again that technique where I chop everything up to have it have a super small face, so that when it goes through a color, let's just say I have a fire texture that's just scrolling, you'll get different colors as it cuts across each of these tiny faces, but it'll only appear as one color, which gives it that faceted look that I'm kind of, as part of the art style. The other one is just normal UV layouts. That doesn't look like something I would do. That may look like no, maybe, I don't know. Let's see if it's in the material. Do I ever use? Yeah, I do. Okay. Oh, so this must be like, this is the parts of the log that are not on fire, and this is the parts of the log that are on fire. That's probably it, because I have that, yeah, I have that like matte that goes between, no, this is the edges, so okay, I texture it through this. I see. Because I'm not using the original texture. So then what I do is I scroll this horizontally, and that's basically what you'll jump between the really bright fire and the less fire and the not on fire at all. And so what that ends up doing is feeling like you're getting some areas that kind of feel like the fire is kind of licking against it and it's not fully fire, because fire kind of it'll go around places, it'll become hot, it'll kind of go off, you'll see something burning and then it seems like that part went out of, and so I love all that nuance to it. The fire is pretty far away in this game as far as this fire size. I haven't done any larger fire or explosions, which would be a whole nother thing to make sure that that style matches, but I think the smoke needs to be better dialed in before I do an explosion. So fire, I am happy with the let's get with this. So what I wanted to do is I have a simple shape. Actually, let's go to the mesh and take a look at it. So this mesh and this material, the material ends up looking a little more overwhelming, but you could say that this is the color. We understand the color is just the scrolling thing, whatevs. The colors I'm using to scroll based on that, so that's the particle speed. Is that it? Don't listen to me because I'm not thinking about, like, I made this and I'm not like, oh, what was I thinking when I made this? I'm trying to do that, but that's not being used. So what I do here is like scale would be the scale of the texture, frequency would be, so we're going the scale of the texture that is basically wiggling this fire log. So you can see right there, it is wiggling. But basically per particle I can adjust how strong that wiggle is. So you just kind of get these wiggling shapes to break up each of the tongues of fire. So fire changes really fast. Real fire is very quickly moving, and what people see is they see the licks that come up and they're like, oh, fire has licks that come up. Okay, so I make sure to have thing that will draw your eye to have a few licks that come up, but then you think, oh, there's a body of fire and that's a fast moving thing that I can't quite take a mental picture of because it's moving so quickly. So basically you have sparks to just give, sparks need to be there in games because it adds a visual level of detail. Most fires don't have sparks all the time, but I think in games it's important to have a lot of sparks. So basically you have the main body, medium pieces, and the medium pieces are like, you have the main body of where the fire is, and then the medium pieces are the ones outside that kind of help build the volume up without having like the core being trying to do too much. So it's just like these pieces in here, and then you can break it up to like have more outside pieces. So that's what you're seeing, like here it's easier to see these outside pieces. Kind of like in the coals you still have some flames kind of peeking out of there. And then I just have this break off piece, which is just, silly little pieces break off and wiggle. That's the thing, is like they have to be geometry based for this style, and then they have to, like, no frame can be the same. You can't see it, like it can't look like a solid piece. It has to be this dynamically moving piece. So that's I think a really strong like foundation, but there's still a lot of questions to be answered on what is the look of like magic, and there's so many things that normally would have transparency that if I'm not having transparency, what are those going to look like and how do I implement them? And yeah, so this is the fire effects.